Hi, I'm Anthony and this is Bob Barker, and today we're going to be talking about the 6 top essential tools that you need to get started as a woodworker or DIYer. So let's get into it. Alright, so before we get into the list of the essential tools, I did want to mention a couple things. One is cost. New tools can get expensive very quickly, as we all know. So it's good just to kind of get down to the essential ones that you're truly going to need. And also keep in mind that you don't have to buy new tools, even though buying new tools is always fun. You can get them secondhand through various different methods, and those will work very well for you to get your projects done. Another thing to consider is space. A lot of us have very limited space that we have for our workshop area. I work out of my garage, so I have to move my cars and keep everything mobile. That way I can still park in here when I'm not working on a project. So you want to make sure that whatever tools you're getting, you have a way to store them, a way to work with them, and it's not going to inhibit the function of your space. And the third thing is dust collection. Dust collection is very necessary for whatever tools that you're getting. You don't have to have, a big fancy setup. A shop vac will do for most things, but you do want to kind of take that into consideration when you're getting tools, is how easy it is to clean up the mess and not inhale everything or have to clean up constantly. And the last thing I wanted to mention is for today we're just focusing more on power tools. There's a lot of other things that you would definitely need that are a little bit outside of what we're kind of focusing on. Things like, say, like wood glue, hammer, screwdriver, tape, all those type of things that are definitely necessary, but not really what we're focusing on now. All right, so let's jump into it. All right, so the number 1 tool on the list is the circular saw. It's a surprisingly versatile tool, and this one in particular illustrates my point that you don't need the most newest or most fancy tool to get the job done. This thing is like a good 15 years old. It's loud and it's heavy, but it works. Now with the circular saw, it's going to handle the majority of the cuts that you need. And if you use it correctly, it can take the place of a track saw, a miter saw, a table saw. Now to do so, sometimes you need some extra guides or assists to help get the right cuts. I often use just a really long leveler to get a nice straight cut, but you can also make your own guide that turns this into a track saw, and there's a whole host of other products that you can use accessories to get the most out of this particular tool. And using those things, you'll be surprised what you can do. Years ago, I made a end table / TV stand with just this, a jigsaw and a drill, and it actually came out pretty decent. But you do need to consider that it's a little harder to be precise with this, so you have to be very patient, take your time, be careful, and when you do that, you'll get it done. Now there are a couple adjustments to consider with these, and one is, pull it up right here. You can change the depth of the blade. Now that's important for a couple of reasons. One, just general safety. You never really want too much of the blade sticking out just in general. It's always a risk to cutting yourself or damaging other things, like the work surface beneath whatever you're cutting. We'll lock that back in place. The other one is the adjustment here. So now what this does, when you loosen this up, it moves this whole thing, so as you can see, it tilts the blade, so you can get different angled cuts with it. I don't use this one as much anymore, but I actually used it a fair amount before, and like I said, that's something that I used a lot when I built that TV stand end table, and it does work. So this is a good, versatile tool, and it'll get most of your cuts done, and it's much cheaper to go with this than getting the track saw and the table saw, especially when you're first getting started. All right, that brings us to number 2 on the list, and that's a drill. Now, it's actually surprising how often you need to drill stuff, and it's actually probably some of the most used tools, not only for just woodworking, but for DIY projects in general. These are necessary. Now, I would definitely recommend to get a drill and driver set. because they do function a little bit differently, and even when you don't need the separate functions, it's kind of nice just to have them both so you can kind of work in tandem, have like one bit on each one and kind of switch off. But with the driver in particular, with the impact function it makes screwing in things so nice. It goes in like butter. So if you've been working with just a drill, I would say give this a shot. It's definitely worth it. And there is a lot of different versatility within these tools themselves. There's a lot of different bits and attachments that you use to get the most out of them. Of course, you have just your regular drill bits, your regular driver pieces, but then you also have things like your countersink bits. That way you can get those screws nice and flush to your wood surface. You have self-centering bits like this one. You just kind of put this in place, and then the drill bit comes out, so it gets it right in the middle of the holes that you're doing. You got things like this one, which is your Forstner bit, and that'll kind of get you kind of like a circular hole down as deep as you need it to. Or if you need to go even further, you can do the hole saw, and that'll drill a nice, clean hole all the way through whatever surface you're working on. And then on top of that, you'll need these for doing like, say, pocket holes. And there's other accessories you can get, like a dowel jig or things like that, to do even extra special stuff with these. So definitely essential tools, and it'll pay for itself over time. All right, and now we're at number 3 on the list, and that's a sander. And this is such a useful tool. Of course, you're going to be doing just general surfacing, but also most of the wood that you're going to be working with is not perfect, and this really helps kind of shape it just a little bit to get it right. Sometimes you have a little lip or something like that, you need to get it right on down, and this will do that. Now there's a couple different types. This one is a sheet sander, so it has a square bottom, but a more common would be the random orbital sander, which has a round bottom. There's a little bit of difference between the two. I've had this one for quite a while, and I think I originally just got it just because it was cheaper than the random orbital sander. But this one is a little bit less aggressive as well. The random orbital sander will take off a little bit more material as you're going. So that could be good or bad depending on what you're doing in particular project. And the other actual good thing about the random orbital sander is with the movement of it, it is truly more random, so you have less chance of getting kind of like sander marks in the surface that you're working. But this one could get into corners that one can as well. So either way, whatever one you're using is going to be super useful. The other thing that you do want to take into account is dust collection, and most of them have some kind of thing like this where you can basically just take this off and connect it to a shop vac or whatever your dust collection is, to keep your surface a little neater, because this will kick up a lot of dust. But overall, very necessary, very useful. Definitely need this to get started. All right, now we're at number 4 on the list, and number 4 is clamps, clamps, clamps. Clamps are so important, and it is really true. You can never have enough of them. They're so useful, especially when you're working by yourself. It can kind of keep things in place, but of course you're going to need them for glue ups and other things like that. And the more you use them, the more you realize, I need more clamps. So I would definitely get, a little bit of a variety of them. They're not necessarily cheap, but they are so needed for so many different projects. So good investment to get some good clamps. All right, so number 5 on our list is a jigsaw. And now this is the second cutting specific tool on the list. There's a reason for that. With the circular saw, you have a round blade, so if you don't cut all the way through something, you're kind of not leaving a straight surface. It's going to have a little bit of curve to the end of your cut. So that's where Jigsaw can definitely help in those type of things, because then you can get that nice and straight and flush on that little edge of that inner cut piece. But you can also do other things that you can't do with a circular saw, like rounded cuts or things like that. So this will kind of take the place of the other extra cuts that you can't do with your circular saw. There's a couple ways to use this. Often people can just drill a hole, and then you can get your saw blade into that hole and then start your cut. Or I've seen people even do like plunge cuts, where you kind of just plunge it and slowly into the material, then you can start your cut. But either way, this is a good tool to round out your cutting needs for your projects. All right, and that brings us to number 6 on the list, and that's a router. Now this is a super versatile tool. This one in particular is a trim router, and for a DIYer, this is probably the route that I would recommend to go. Now you do have the bigger, beefier routers with a bigger motor that are typically mounted to like a table or something. But this one will handle the majority of the things that you need as a DIYer, and you can save that one for later when you have more specialty needs for it. But this will handle so many different things. I got a flush trim bit right here, which I've used so many times to get your edges of two jointed pieces nice and flush. But there's so many more things that you can do, from like roundovers, chamfers, cutting within it, like making slots like we have on our workbench here. I have this accessory here, so this one helps you plunge down into the material, and it'll keep it at the right depth, and you can have more control over it. You have things like this, which is an edge guide, which will kind of keep your router at a specific area or across the edge. And there's just so many other different router bits that you can do things with. You can make dados, you can do the joinery to make like cabinet doors, or a whole host of things just depending on the bits. There's a giant world of stuff that you can do with it. But like I said, for the beginning DIYer, nice trim router is definitely a very essential and useful tool. All right, so those are the basic tools that I would definitely recommend for anybody that's starting to get into DIY or woodworking in general. Those are things you really need. Now past that, there's a lot more tools that are useful and would be nice to have, and one of those tools would be the miter saw, and kind of giving you a sneak peek of the miter station build, which the video will be coming soon on that one. But the miter saw helps make a little bit more faster and precise cuts. You can set it up so you can get good 90-degree cuts. You can set up your miter station so you can get repeatable cuts and not having to measure. And this also has dust collection with it, so vacuum hooked into the back, so it helps decrease the mess. It doesn't make it perfect, but it definitely helps. And on this one, you have this adjustment in the back where you can tilt your blade to get angled cuts there. Put that one back. And of course, you also have the adjustment here in front where you can move it side to side, and you can get different angled cuts with that as well. So it makes it a little bit easier to get some of the cuts that you need done. But like I said, you can get pretty much all of these done with the circular saw. It just takes a little bit more time to get it set up to do it with the circular saw than the miter saw. All right, so another tool that would be really nice to have to help step up your game would be the table saw, which since I've got it, I love this thing and I use it a lot. Now this one is a contractor type table saw, so it's definitely less expensive than like the professional cabinet saws. But for a DIYer, this saves money and space to get one of these, and this just opens up a whole new world of precision and makes cuts so much faster and easier than you can do with like the circular saw. But like I said, you can get it done, but this will do it even better when you're ready to invest in one of these. And then even beyond that, there's a lot more tools that you can get to step up your game even more. Then we're talking things like a band saw, a drill press, a joiner, a planer, those type of things, which would be really nice to have, but not necessarily essential for a beginning DIYer. Those are things that you may get into later on down the line when you know that you truly need those for specific projects, or when you have the space for them. And me personally, I still don't have those tools yet, although at one point I probably will, because I do love buying tools. But for the majority of the projects, if you stick kind of with that essential list, you'll be able to get the job done. All right, so that's the list of the tools that's essential to get started on your DIY journey. And that's going to be it for today. Hope that you liked the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.